Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another Genshin Impact video. Today I will be going over Beidou's mathematically best builds, and I have some interesting findings about the new Emblem of Severed Fate artifact set. So let's just get right into it. As always, these videos assume that Beidou is at level 90 with level 6 talents, and that she is at C0, and the weapons are also at level 90 and refinement 1 with their passives up, and the artifacts do not have any substats. More details on that later. The damage that we're going to be taking into account are 12 ticks of her ulti, however Beidou cannot achieve this naturally because she attacks way too slow. So this will assume that you use Beidou ult and then swap to another faster attacking character to proc these. In a perfect world you can manage to get 14 discharges, but for sake of realism and consistency, we're just going to keep it at 12. I do want to explain a little bit about how Beidou's ult actually works for those that aren't completely clear on that. Basically you activate it, and after you attack somebody it is going to chain lightning between all the enemies in the area. However, if there is only one enemy, you will only see one tick of damage, but if there are multiple enemies, her damage is going to skyrocket because the electro discharge actually bounces between targets. So if you have one enemy and you hit him, it's going to hit the original target. Obviously, it is then going to jump to the second target and then bounce back to the original target. So you essentially get 2 ticks of damage per discharge at C0. If you had C2, this increases the jumps to 5 instead of 3, so it would hit the original target, bounce to the second target, then come back to the original target, and then bounce back to the second target, and then finally jump back to the original target, so they would be hit 3 times instead of 2. This is a C0 Beidou guide, but I just wanted to explain that for those that didn't know. Now, the first build that I tested was 2-piece Thundering Fury and 2-piece Noblesse, which is arguably the most popular build for her. Very basic, very bread and butter. In this test, the highest damaging weapon by far was the Wolf's Gravestone, but this assumes that it has 100% uptime on its passive, which in actual play it will not. Will be around 80% since the buff lasts for 12 seconds and her ult lasts for 15 seconds, so it has about 75% uptime. But even then, it is still miles ahead of everything else. After Gravestone, the strongest weapon by far and coincidentally the best 4-star is the Serpent Spine. It even outdamages the Black Cliff at max stacks, which is something you probably will not be achieving if you're playing Beidou as a sub DPS. Unfortunately, the Black Cliff weapons aren't able to get stacks if the character is off field, so if you kill something with a Beidou electric discharge while you are on another character, it won't actually give her a Black Cliff stack, so that is not a viable strategy. Serpent Spine is also very consistent. The buff is super easy to proc and maintain since she is an off-field carry, so she won't really be getting hit all that much, and it's a guaranteed drop from the battle pass. For your free-to-play options though, you have the new upcoming Tuna Sword, the Luxurious Sea Lord. This thing has a massive 55% attack substat, as well as a 24% elemental burst damage buff at R5. This sword will be coming as part of an event in the near future, so I wanted to include it because it is actually really good for Beidou, and it nearly outdamages the Serpent Spine. You will also be able to R5 this as part of the event, so make sure that you do that. The next set I tested was 4-piece Thundersoother, and the weapon rankings remained exactly the same, but the actual damage was way higher with this set. But you do have the caveat that you do have to be hitting an enemy affected by Electro. So this is only really going to work in firework comps where you are constantly proccing Electro Charge, or if you're going to be using Beidou alongside Keqing as your main Electro DPS, and in some cases maybe even a C6 Fischl, but otherwise I really would not recommend using this set. The other set I tested was 4-piece Noblesse, and again, the weapon rankings are the same, and the numbers look pretty close, but this is because in this sheet, the buff is expected to be in effect at all times, which is not how it actually works. In reality, you will see a net gain overall since you are giving your team a 20% attack buff, and again, Beidou is an off-field carry, so the other character that you put into the field will be doing more damage as a result of using this set, but Beidou's own damage will be way weaker than the previous 2 builds, as this only really has about a 75%, 70% uptime. And now, let's get into the new set, the one that I was excited for and the one that everybody was looking forward to for a lot of these off-field carries, the Emblem of Severed Fate. For this, I tested different main stats since you can only get energy recharge on timepieces, so I swapped it up, but in the end, using the traditional attack main stat, electro, and crit yielded the best results. And like I said before, these tests do not take into account artifact substats. However, because this set is special, I did want to do some calculations with some substats. However, I'm not going to be including any attack or crit related substats because that would in turn affect both results. All these builds would get improved because those are universally damage increasing stats. Instead, I just tried to work in only ER substats to find out what would be the threshold of ER required to make your 4-piece emblem set do more damage than the aforementioned builds. In this case, I'm comparing it to 2-piece Thundering Fury and 2-piece Noblesse, which, although it does deal slightly less damage than 4-piece Thunder Soother, it is completely universal, it has no conditions, and is easier to farm since you only need 2 good artifacts from the same set instead of 4. So I will be using that as my benchmark to compare versus 4-piece emblem. Now, for the Gravestone, if you want your 4-piece emblem build with an attack percentage timepiece, an electro cup, and a crit or attack hat to deal more damage than the exact same thing on the 2-piece Thundering Fury 2-piece Noblesse build, you're going to need a whopping 43.2% ER from substats specifically. You can't just swap out the attack timepiece for an ER timepiece because the damage loss is way too much. But 43.2% is an insane amount of ER from substats alone. It's basically 6 perfect max ER rolls on your substats, which isn't too unrealistic to get 6 perfect rolls or at least 6 or 7 high rolls out of 25, but it is still very difficult and it takes away from the traditional DPS stat rolls that you would get like attack percentage and crit, which you also want regardless of whatever build you're using. You do not want to replace attack and crit for ER with 4-piece emblem. That is the thing that most people are getting confused. You don't want to replace attack and crit. You are simply trying to get as much ER as possible without detrimenting your other stats to gain an edge, to get that little extra sauce. But this is a lot, okay? That's only for Gravestone specifically, but that is a lot of ER. The other weapons are much less extreme cases. For example, if you're using the Skyward Pride, you only need about 16% ER from subs to make it do more damage than 2-piece Thundering Fury, 2-piece Noblesse. So if your main weapon or the weapon that you're currently using on Beidou is the Skyward Pride, you definitely want to be using 4-piece emblem, provided that you can get that extra 16% ER from subs. If you can, then boom, perfect. It is now a more powerful build than 2-piece Thundering Fury and 2-piece Noblesse. The same thing can be said about the new Katsuragikiri, which is the Inazuma Claymore. However, this thing is horrendously bad. It comes with 45% ER as a sub, and it has increased elemental skill damage, but if you use your elemental skill right before you ult, you won't be able to ult because this thing actually drains your energy and you're going to have to wait a couple of seconds, which is really, really bad. The damage overall of it is by far the weakest, so I really do not recommend building this thing whatsoever for Beidou. If you don't have a free-to-play weapon, just build an archaic and just wait for the tuna sword to come out if you don't have an archaic built already, because yeah, just no. But for the Serpent Spine, for example, you would need an incredible 53% ER from substats alone, which is even worse than Gravestone. So if you're going to use Gravestone or Serpent Spine or the Tuna Lord, which are the 3 best weapons for Beidou, you don't want to be using the Emblem set if you don't have these insane ER subs. So in conclusion, 4-piece Thunder Soother does the most damage overall, but it does rely on using Kaching main DPS or using Beidou and Electrocharge comp with Child mainly, which a lot of people don't have. 4-piece Emblem also gives you ER, which makes her have less downtime between ults and more consistent damage and easier to transition through your ult rotations across all your party members. And then 2-piece Thundering Fury and 2-piece Noblesse is kind of like in the middle of the pack. It doesn't really have any downsides, it's just there. In reality, I would recommend just going for 2-piece Thundering Fury and 2-piece Noblesse because the best weapons for her do the most with this set. It has the most ease of use and it is the least problematic to get good stats for, but to be honest, you should just use whichever one you have the best substats for. And as for weapons, like I said, just use a Wolf's Gravestone. If you don't have one, then use a Serpent Spine, and if you can't get that, then just wait for the Tuna weapon and use that. In the meantime, keep farming your artifacts. And that is it for Beidou. Ladies and gentlemen, the spreadsheets are linked below as always, but these ones in particular are pretty messy, so be warned. And that's going to be it for me. Thank you to my patrons. You guys have helped me out so much. I really appreciate it, and I will see you guys with a mathematically best Kazuha build video very soon. Take care.